Okay, it's me, Yvonne, back again to give a little bit more of my story in reference to the betrayal, greed, and jealousy which destroyed my mother's family. Okay, and I had just told you about how my sister had the locks changed and someone came and vandalized my mother's home. And this was after we had left court, and she wasn't authorized even to do that. Okay? So the next month, we went back to court, and this was on November the 2nd. It was the first Friday in November of 2018. This was our court date, okay? So the judge had already informed me that they wouldn't be giving me any more continuances or whatever. So I had to go pro se because I was unable to hire an attorney, and the free attorney said that the case was way too complicated for them to deal with. So I was forced to just go pro se and do the best I could for myself and for my mother. Now, on this particular date, once again, my mother was not brought to the courtroom. Okay? My sister left my mother at home, at her house, with someone she hired to stay there with my mother instead of bringing her with her to court. Now, my point is, if you're telling the truth and you're saying my mother's so happy and she said she want to be with you, why not bring her to the courthouse and let her just say that? If that's what you're saying that she's saying, and that's what you're saying how she feel, okay? But my sister knows that that's a lie. So she will not dare bring my mother to the court because my mother's mind is very sharp. And though she might, go along with what they're saying, my mother knows when to speak when it really matters. And that's simply why she always say, well, why didn't the judge ask me? Or why didn't anyone take me to court? But anyhow, we're in the courtroom. And the first thing, this attorney, Catherine Jones, who was appointed to my mother as an attorney by the court, Judge Cotton, she came in and the first thing she did was waived my mother's right to appear and waived my mother's right to speak, which I objected to quickly. Okay? And my objection was because I had just spoke with my mother the night before. And my mother very clearly said that she could speak for her on her own behalf. She could speak for herself. And she was under the impression that she was going to be coming to court since we were going to be discussing her. But she wasn't there. So I objected. Okay? And I objected because my mother wanted to speak. Okay, so the judge kind of overruled it, and we went on. And next, she said that she started telling the judge all this stuff that my mother had said in reference to me. But she didn't tell me that I could do this, and she didn't tell me that I could spend any. Okay, and I was like, objection. So the judge said, what's your objection? I said, Your Honor, they are saying that my mother is incompetent and she couldn't be here to speak for herself, yet she's telling you all these things that my mother said. That seems as if she had a conversation with my mother, which usually you can't have with an incompetent person. So the judge said, yeah, you're correct. So she told her that, she went along with me on that. So next we got to the point, well, actually before that, we got to the point about my mother's competency level, okay? And I once again objected because I said, Your Honor, my mother is not incompetent. No doctors was there to say my mother was incompetent. And now that I look at these two doctors' reports, they say two totally different things. So it's just like the court took these two doctors' reports and didn't read them or didn't have a doctor to examine them to say that, wow, what these doctors wrote is in fact proven that this person is incompetent. But one of the doctors even had question marks on his examination report. And one doctor works with my sister's daughter at the University of Maryland Medical Center in Millersville, which still the senior care center. So how could my sister's daughter work at a doctor's office with a doctor that my mother had never seen but one time to get this report? And he wrote my mother was severely disabled. I could get the report and read it to you and just show you the contradictions in what the two doctors say. One said, one doctor, the doctor where my niece works, he said my mother had severe mental disabilities, as if she was schizophrenic, bipolar, mentally retarded, in other words. And I'm like, wow, who would wish something like that on their own mother? Somebody who has been healthy all her life. My mother has been on natural herbs. My mother don't have no illnesses. My mother only has taken a small blood pressure medicine all her life. And that's it. My mother go to a holistic doctor. Normally, she was going to a holistic doctor. My mother has always been on natural herbs and vitamins and has always been very healthy. Mine is very sharp. But for you to come in a courtroom and for you to want your mother to appear to be incompetent, I've seen incompetency. I know some people who are dealing with their spouses and parents who are incompetent. And these people can't tell you who you are. These people can't read. These people can't comprehend. These people can't write. These people could not be left in a senior adult activity center alone, or anywhere alone for that matter. Okay, but here my sister is insisting on saying that my mother is incompetent. Okay, and so I objected, and the judge, she went on and she was like, well, your sister has two doctor's statements saying that your mother's incompetent, and I'm going on what the physicians say. I'm like, but Your Honor, my sister has friends within the medical field that can do her favors in filling out this paperwork. These doctors aren't here, and we can't question the validity of these reports because no one is here to verify that. Well, it didn't matter to the judge because she just went on, as if my mother was incompetent, okay? So at the end of the trial, during the trial, they brought up the fact that my mother had given me this bank account that had $12,000 in it and that I spent because she allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do with it, okay? And they wasn't even supposed to know about it, but they found out, and I didn't care if they found out, but it wasn't their money, it was my mother's, and that's what she chose to do because she gave me that money at the time when I was over there caring for her. And my sister was only giving me $100 a month out of my mother's money to care for my mother. $100 a month. I have checks to show you. I took pictures of the checks that she gave me, and it said for mother's care. Now, my mother getting over $3,000 a month, and you have possession of all her money. Okay, I'm there going to the grocery store every day. I'm cooking 3 meals a day. I'm cleaning. I'm taking my mother to the doctor. I took my mother in for a surgery. I paid the bill. I did get reimbursed for that. I sat there and with her at Washington Hospital Center. I took some pictures and then we had it on Facebook when my mother had on a red jacket and we was in Washington Hospital Center. You might have to go back on my timeline, but you can also see that. None of my brothers or sisters came up there and sat with me while I waited for my mother in that hospital to have that surgery done. My mother has a stent in her kidney, which should have been removed in 6 months. 6 months was September. And my mother hasn't been to hasn't gotten that stent taken out of her as of yet. Okay? So, don't tell me you're so concerned about my mother when you're not even really concerned about making sure her health is in check. Okay? So at the end of the day, okay, so they questioned the money that my mother had given me. Okay? They even took me to court and tried to have me charged and locked up. But the court threw it out because they said this is not no theft. If her name is here, her mother took her to the bank and put her name on it and told, we don't know what she told her. So we can't say that it's theft. So they said, we're not going to charge this woman with that. But my sisters and brothers are running around telling everybody about what my mother gave me. And yes, she did. She gave it to me and I spent the money up. I sure did because she gave me that right. My mother spent some of it too. Okay, but what they failed to tell everybody is that while we were in court that same day, the attorney brought up my mother's other bank account that she uses, her daily bank account with SunTrust, which my sister Curleen had her name on. Okay, the one, but when I took my mother to the bank and all her money had been removed in the very beginning is how all this got started. Well, when they took and did the review of that account, first of all, the attorney told the judge that account that my mother had with SunTrust, all the money had been transferred into an account that had Thelma Brown Brooks and Curleen Addison's name only on it. Maisie Keller Phillips' name was only listed as a beneficiary to be paid at death. Now, how can you put your 87-year-old mother's money, how could you make your 87-year-old mother the beneficiary of her own money to be paid at death? The judge asked my sister, where do they do that at? My sister couldn't even look at the judge. She looked to the floor, okay? And then the attorney said, well, she went through that account and she couldn't account for $15,000, okay? So my sister said, oh, well, I know where it is. Oh, I know where yeah, you know where it is because you took it. You had no business taking it. So don't be so fast telling people that I took what my mother gave me because my mother would give me anything because she knows my love for her, okay? And you two girls, you two sisters have an account that you are collecting my mother's money, monthly paychecks into, over $3,000, and it's going into an account with just y'all's names on it, and my mother has zero access to her own money. You know what the judge told my sister that day? I need for you to go to SunTrust Bank, and I want every penny in that account to be given over to this attorney, Miss Kelsey, as of today. My sister said, oh, well, I'll do it when I come back. I got to go to Dallas, Texas for, I have to go to Dallas, Texas for a funeral or whatever she had to go for. And I'm leaving this evening. So when I come back, no, the judge said, no, you won't do nothing when you come back. The bank closed at 5 o'clock. You're going to go over to that SunTrust Bank when you leave this courtroom today, and you're going to relinquish every dollar in your mother's into the hands of Sharon Kelsey. And it's not for you to collect another penny of your mother's money. Okay? And so at the end of the day, she had to take and turn all the money over to this attorney, which in turn got offered the case, about a month or so later because she made judge. And now my mother's money is in the hand of another attorney by the name of David Allen in Crofton, okay? Now, at the end of the day in court, it was the judge had determined that I got highly upset. I had a breakdown in the courtroom when she gave my sister guardianship because I was like, no, I'm like, that's the ultimate thing that you cannot do. I'm going off. And so she told my sister that you have to let her see her mother and spend time with her mother at least once every week. So we had it arranged that my niece Takesha was going to meet with my sister Curleen to get my mother and to bring my mother to me. And I was going to keep my mother for at least a day, a night, or, a visit during the week, which now my sister has not given me a visit with my mother in over a month at the time I'm taping this recording. which is about almost a year later, okay? Um, she got upset because I had video recorded my mother with her permission, just so that the judge could see a face and a person, a human being, my mother, who is competent, who can talk, who can read, who can write, who can reason, who can think for herself. I wanted the judge to know that my mother is not incompetent. And see, the only means that I had to do this was to send a video recording to the judge of my mother reading, talking, speaking her mind, okay? In which my sister got highly upset because she didn't get a copy of the video. So she don't know what the judge has in her possession. She don't know what they saw. All she knows is she didn't get a copy, and they wrote a letter to the court to complain that they didn't copy. But they won't get a copy because it's not for me to give them all of my evidence. I gave them the letter, okay? Anyway, so my sister had possession of my mother. She got, at the end of the day, when we left court that day, my sister had guardianship of my mother, okay? I was heartbroken. Yes, I was. Okay, I was just crushed. And after my sister had my mother, and I had to I would get my little weekly visits. I had to communicate it by text, and my mother would come and spend a day, and we worked it out with Keisha for a little while, but then eventually we'd kind of like start meeting each other so I could get my mother. Okay, now, while my mother was in my sister's home, this was after the money was taken away from my sister, okay? Now, I notice my mother's not going to the beauty shop getting the pretty hairdos no more. My mother is not going to the nail salons like she was going. As a matter of fact, my mother came to visit me like one day, and my mother was walking so funny. And I was like, Mom, what's wrong? Why are you walking like that? I didn't know what was going on. My mother took her shoes off, and I looked at my mother's feet. My mother's toenails were so long that they was hurting her. They was hurting her feet while she was walking. So I took and I gave my mother a pedicure myself. Okay. Anyway, now after court, like I said, it was almost instantly that she started making my mother go to these adult activity centers instead of going to the nail shops and the hair shops and shopping, and they going on trips and what have you, okay? And one day, I got a call, and my mother had fell in my sister's house. Now, I've heard 3 different stories as to what actually happened, and my mother's memory is kind of short, And so I do know that my mother fell, and it was somewhere either going up the steps or down the steps. Like I said, I've heard several different stories, even from my sister out of her own mouth. And my mother fell, and she broke her femur bone, which is the largest bone in her leg, right over top of her kneecap, okay? My sister did not, let me reemphasize, my sister did not immediately take my 87-year-old mother, she was 86 at the time, year-old mother to the doctor, okay? My sister instead kept my mother in the house for almost 3 days before she finally decided to take her to the patient first clinic, okay? And when she got my mother to the patient first clinic, the doctor there had my mother rushed by ambulance from patient first to the University of Maryland in Baltimore Medical Center. Now, why would she take my mother there where all the prison inmates go, all the junkies and druggies go, and it's almost like a PG hospital of Baltimore. Now, why you would decide to have my mother taken to that hospital is crazy, but that's what they did. They took my mother to that hospital. I immediately went up to the hospital. My mother, they didn't even have a bed. My mother was laying on a gurney in a makeshift room in the hallway of the hospital. Okay? She had to have a surgery done on her leg, which she had to have a pin placed in her leg. Okay? Once the surgery was done, then she had to go to a rehabilitation center. So my sister didn't allow me to have any input as to where my mother should go, knowing that I didn't have transportation and I was available to go and sit with my mother every day as long as it was somewhere that I can conveniently get to. But instead, she decided to take my mother out to Crofton, Maryland. It was a pretty nice nursing facility and rehab center. And my mother, she liked the people there, and she enjoyed, I got out there a couple of times, but I talked to her daily on the phone. And my mother was there for like 6 weeks, I believe. And while she was there, like she said, they took pretty good care of my mother. She had physical therapy, and it was a nice center. But what got me was we usually have a family outing, a family reunion just with us, me and my mother, my family, my mother's family and children. Every year on the first of the year, we always get together for our annual family reunion. And this was something that my mother demanded. On the first of every year, we're going to be together. Well, last year, since my sister had control over my mother, she decided to change it. She changed the venue. She changed the date. She changed everything. I did not attend. My mother was still in the rehab center. She came and got my mother out of the rehab center in the cold to take her to this little family thing that they had, that I heard the food was not all that great. And then she had to take my mother back to the rehab center. Now, when it was time for my mother to be released from the rehab center, I was on the phone talking to my mother this particular day. Well, I can tell you, we talked every day. And while we were on the phone, my sister walked in the room and was like, "Hey, it's time for you to go home." My mother said, "I didn't tell nobody I was ready to leave. I'm not ready to go nowhere." So she said, "Well, the doctor releasing you." She said, "I didn't say I was telling them that I was ready to go home because I'm not ready to go nowhere." Now, who does not want to leave a hospital, a rehab center, and go home? My mother sure didn't want to go. The nurse had to come in and have a talk with my mother, and my mother still refused to go with my sister. That right there should have told the nursing staff something, just like it told me something, that my mother did not want to go back with my sister. She would rather stay in the rehab center than to go to my sister's house. But then again, she was forced to go. She told the woman, the nurse said, "Well, Miss Phillips, if you stay, it's going to cost you like $500 a day." My mother said, "I got money. I got a SunTrust bank account. And if I want to pay $500 a day, I can afford to pay $500 a day. I got money." Anyway, somehow they convinced my mother to get her clothes on, and my sister took my mother home with her. Okay? Now, you'd have had my mother fall and break her leg, not take her to the doctors for 3 days, and then you're gonna, that's neglect. That's abuse and neglect. We don't know. I don't know what actually happened. And why wasn't my mother immediately taken to the hospital when she fell at 86 years old? Anybody know that your bones are fragile once you become that age? Anybody knows that any fall that any person of that age had, they should be immediately taken to the hospital just to get checked. But yet my mother had to lay for 3 days with a broken leg. And this chick still has my mother? Had that been a child, yours or mine, they would have took the child out of our possession and they would have put the child in a foster home. So why does this woman still have my mother? Okay? And on top of that, like I say, my mother didn't even want to go. Okay? So now she gets my mother back home, and I guess they didn't, say my mother is fine. She runs my mother straight to these senior activity centers with a walker, limping, walking crooked now. I mean, my mother left her home healthy, happy, in good health, walking straight, having a good time with her kids, laughing, doing things that she wanted to do, calling her shots. And now she's forced to live under this witch's control. These demonic spirits all around my mother, intimidating my mother, talking to my mother like she's a child. I'm wondering, is she on a resentment tip? Does she resent that the fact that my mother didn't raise her? What is it? Okay? And so my mother has been going to these centers and like I say, and that's what's been going on. But in the meantime and in between time, I have been fighting for my mother. I have been to the courthouse on numerous occasions. I have filed numerous petitions, motions, everything. I have proven to the judge and showed the judge the discrepancies in their stories when they write these letters in response to the motions and the petitions that I have filed. If my mother is incompetent, how can she take her own medicine? And how can she make some decisions and take care of herself? Either she can, either she's competent or she's incompetent. I mean, I don't feel like, I understand that it might be a little gray line as far as maybe needing some help with making some type of, major decisions, and that's what we're for. I mean, my mother can say what she wants, and if she don't quite thoroughly understand something, I've always been there to break it down for her so that she could thoroughly understand what's being asked of her, okay? But for my sister to have this control and this judge to just say, everything that I request and everything that I ask, she denies. So now, what they have decided is they want to hurry up and get rid of my mother's house. My mother's house is in reverse mortgage, okay? My mother has lived in that house since like 1973, okay? My mother, that was a home that my mother purchased on her own as a single parent after my father had died back in 1971. That was my mother's dream home, okay? That house has been through a fire. That house has been through renovation. And that was where my mother was comfortable at. That was what my mother that was home for my mother. My mother didn't get confused as to what room she was in or where she was at. When she was home, she knew exactly where she was. She knew exactly where everything was, okay? Well, I get a notice from this attorney, Mr. Allen, that he wrote to the judge. He then secretly met with my brothers and sisters. Secretly. How could you be an attorney and you're supposed to be working for my mother and all of her children who claim that they are interested parties, but in fact, half of them aren't interested at all. I don't think any of them are really interested, okay? And how could you tell this Tell this man to get rid of your mother's home. God forbid, if Curleen dropped dead today or tomorrow, where is my mother supposed to go? God forbid, if Curleen drops and get Alzheimer's or dementia herself,